Ladies and gentlemen, this is Nate Crespo, your host for today and forever, and welcome back to another episode of the Lawyers in the Making podcast, where it is my job to focus on the unique journeys to the law and law school of professionals in the legal field and law students. Let's talk about what we're doing today, because today we have another spectacular guest. She's a UCLA School of Law graduate and currently works as a partner at Complex Appellate Litigation Group. She's held past positions as a shareholder and inaugural chair for the Appellate Practice Group at Butch Holter and as a partner and co-chair for the Appellate Practice Group at Haynes and Boone. Finally, she is the creator and host of the award-winning podcast, The Portia Project. Excited to have her on the podcast today, Mrs. MC Sungaila. Welcome to the podcast. How are we doing today? Before going any further, I'd like to say a quick word about the sponsor of this podcast, Rhetoric. Back in episode 25, I had the privilege of having the CEO, Luke Yingling, on the podcast, and ever since that episode, fell in love with the product. Rhetoric takes user briefs and motions and compares them against the text of opinions written by judges to identify ways to tailor their arguments to better persuade the judges handling their cases. Rhetoric's focus on persuasion and helps users find new ways to improve their odds of success through more persuasive arguments. Know more, win more. I was able to see a demo of the product, and its cutting-edge technology and fascinating features make for a product I am proud to sponsor, and further shows the new digital era the field of law has been entering thus far on my journey doing this podcast. If you decide to book a demo, let them know Nate sent you. Be sure to check them out in the show notes below or at userhetoric.com. One word, userhetoric.com. Now, back to the show.
Thanks, Nate. Thank you very much for having me, and congratulations on your podcast as well.
Well, thank you so much. Congratulations on your podcast as well, which is much more popular than mine. It has awards as well, which I didn't even know was possible in the podcast space. But MC, before we get started here, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm MC Sungaila, and I am an appellate lawyer, which means I argue and write to the higher courts. When somebody loses in the trial court and they say, I'm going to appeal that, they call me and I write briefs and talk to the appellate judges about, the outcome and reversal or affirming whatever happened in the trial court. I'm also currently a part-time student. I'm getting an LLM, which is an extra law degree in space law, air and space law at Ole Miss in Mississippi. And yeah, that's kind of it, I think, right now, as far as the law realm.
Well, I'm excited for you to be here today, and I can't wait to talk about the space law stuff because I love space more than anything on this world, I'm telling you. But let's go all the way back. It was a wonderful year. It was 1988. Everyone was having a ton of fun. You were graduating at the university at Stanford in political science, and later that year, you ended up at UCLA School of Law. So, simply put, MC, why'd you go to law school?
Well, I'll say the short answer is initially I thought I would be an international lawyer. That was my desire when I went to law school. I didn't end up becoming an international lawyer, although I have done some international work after that. Kind of discovered that meant a lot of contracts and a lot of transactional work, which wasn't really my interest. I enjoyed litigating and writing and all of that a lot more. But that was my initial goal. And I don't know how I initially decided I wanted to be a lawyer. I took a long time to decide when I was a young child, until one day I came up with, I'm going to be a lawyer, and everybody wondered how that happened. There's no one in the family, all of this stuff. So somehow I came up with it. The first idea I had was that I would like to be a poet, so a writer. But then after I had that idea, I had this image of starving in a garret. I wasn't sure what a garret was, but I definitely didn't want to starve. So I thought, well, I better find something else that can put a roof over my head, that I like, but also can sustain me in life in the more tangible ways.
So going forward, you're at UCLA School of Law. We love talking about the first year. Some people hate it. Some people love it. How was it for you?
First year of law school, I think it's challenging for everyone, even those who enjoy it. I mean, you're completely being broken down and reassembled, how you write, how you think, all of those things. And if you come in like I had been always kind of being a good writer and, all of that stuff. It's completely different way of writing and thinking in law school. And so it can be challenging when you're like, hey, that was the thing I was good at. And now they're completely dissembling and red marking everything that I'm writing. So yeah, so it's really challenging. Later in law school is a little bit better, but yeah, first year's tough.
So going forward, going later in law school, of course, you had an interest in international law, but as we always love talking about on this podcast, it's very important to find out what you want to do with the law in terms of specialization, but it's especially important to find out what you don't want to do with the law. So going forward in your legal experience, through law school and then after law school even, were there any internships, maybe other jobs that you took which helped you figure that out and answer that question of what you wanted to do? I know you were interested in international law, but how did you come around to appellate work as being, this is what I want to do?
Yeah, I think that took a long time. That took many years, even after law school, because I was a litigator, a more general business litigator for several years after I graduated. And I had 2 different judicial clerkships as well. I think those clerkships and an externship I had in law school kind of, 2 of them were on appellate courts. So I got to see what was involved with that. I never really recognized that you could just be that kind of lawyer, that you could be an appellate lawyer, but I knew that I enjoyed that kind of work from being in the internship and being in the judicial clerkships. So I knew I liked to think about the law and read and write and research something that a lot of other people think is kind of boring, but I enjoyed it. So yeah.
So this love for writing, you wanted to be a poet, which is very, very interesting. I never thought of that. Maybe I could be a poet myself one day. But you wanted to be a poet. Where does this love of writing and poetry and intrigue, especially the cross sections between the writing and the law? There's a lot that goes into it. Of course, sometimes it's boring, but when you find something that you love, it's very important to keep doing it. So where does this love for the writing come from?
I don't know exactly, but it's an aspect of creativity. I think that's one of the things that there's so many different things you can do as a lawyer, and finding something that kind of fits just right for you, where your skill set is and where sort of your natural strengths are. I think that's unique to the law, that there are so many different things you can do with it and find a fit for you, that might not be a good fit for others. I mean, I remember when I went into litigation, I did actually have a trial as a younger lawyer. And it was so exciting. It's like, oh my gosh, you get to go to trial and do all of this stuff as a very junior associate. It's supposed to be like the holy grail of litigation. We're actually going to trial. And I really discovered through that, as you said earlier, like what you don't like, I really discovered through that. I was like, I hate being a trial lawyer. Like, this is just really not for me, primarily because I felt very empathetic towards any of the witnesses who were being cross-examined. And I did not want to do that to another person because it's really brutal. And I found that the trial lawyers actually loved that. Their favorite thing was cross-examining someone and like showing that someone's a liar and this and that. And even if it was true, even if they were a liar, I didn't really like to be the person doing that. And so I kind of discovered that during this trial that I'm like, oh my gosh, that I do not want to do that. And so I thought, well, I must be a very different kind of creature than the trial lawyers, who were great trial lawyers. That's what they loved. And that's what I felt bad doing. So I knew this wasn't my thing. So it's hard when you thought that's what you were going to do. And like 4 or 5 years into your career, you realize, oh my God, I was like totally wrong about that. This is really not what I should be doing because it just doesn't match my temperament and other things. But I did learn during the trial that I liked talking to the judge, everything that was talking to the judge, like arguing motions or writing briefs or jury instructions, anything written and anything where you could have this, one-on-one sort of legal discussion. And I was like, if that is the part of the trial that I could do, I would do it. And everybody told me at the time, there is no such job. Like, the trial lawyer's job is to be a trial lawyer. You cannot just write the motions and whatnot and pass it off to somebody else. But it turns out that's not true. That's what we as appellate lawyers do when we consult a trial. We do all of that stuff. We write things, we may argue them, but we are involved in the legal strategy. So it turns out the part I identified that I liked is actually very much part of being an appellate lawyer, which I still didn't know was a specialty. But what ultimately pushed me in that direction was that right after the trial, where I was despondent because I was like, this is not what I want to do, and I have no idea what I want to do next, I got this great opportunity to write a brief in the US Supreme Court in a case that was very high profile. And so it was my first appellate brief on my own. And I just kind of threw myself into it. I didn't mind that I didn't sleep for like a week writing this brief. I really enjoyed just digging in and figuring out how to make this brief effective and like help the case. And I felt like I had a lot of instinct about what should be done, maybe perhaps from my clerking on the appellate courts. I had learned something from there, by osmosis. So yeah, so that's how I, from utter despair to like, oh my gosh, this is totally what I want to do, in a matter of months. So I would say like never give up and always be exploring, other options.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. You're really, the cliche term of throwing yourself in the fire. You really did throw yourself into that burning building because your first appellate brief is in the highest court in the world that you got to write against. So I think that is just absolutely amazing that was your first starting experience. What a way to kick off the appellate career. So going forward, you had landed yourself at Horvitz and Levy. You were there for 13 years. Starting as an associate, you eventually became a partner, which is spectacular. So can you talk about that experience that you had there for those 13 years? And can you also weave in there sort of how you got to be a partner? What ways did you put yourself in a position to become a partner?
Yeah, so after the experience with the Supreme Court brief, and I had decided, yeah, this is the kind of stuff I'd like to do. I want to go somewhere where I can be very well trained and with a bunch of people who know way more than I do and have had a lot more experience in this arena. And so I started looking around because the firm I was at the time had a very small, like one person appellate department. And I thought, I'm probably not going to get very much appellate work here. And I'd rather get trained by a bunch of different people who have different styles and all of that. So I started looking around for where could I do this. And there were 2 appellate boutiques in Los Angeles, and I lived about, an hour from there. So I would have to leave home and move to Los Angeles to pursue the specialty I wanted to pursue. So yeah, so I applied to the 2 appellate boutiques. Horvitz and Levy was one of them. And I got offers at both. And I decided to go to Horvitz and Levy because at the time, and for the whole time, almost the whole time I was there, Ellis Horvitz, the firm's founder and the founder of appellate practice in California, was still there and actively working. So I ended up being trained by him, by working on cases with him. And so it was, that's what I was looking for at that point in time, was some great training and just soaking everything up and learning from this group of people. I just enjoy that sort of, I feel like any case is better if you put, 2 heads is better than one kind of thing. Just, I still feel that way now. And I still work that way since Horvitz and Levy, is having that brainstorming and just working out issues, because we have panels of judges, it's panels of judges, not just one. And I like to get different perspectives on the legal arguments so we can, kind of preview maybe how different judges would look at this. So that was a great opportunity to do that at Horvitz and Levy as well. I think that you asked the question of partnership, and I think firms are different in that regard. I would say at the time, at least, that Horvitz and Levy was one of the few boutiques where how much business you had and how many clients you had was not, and it was not part of the equation. It usually is every place else I've been at, but it was more like your skill and your collegiality and, working together well with the teams and having success in the brief writing and argument. It really was just like skill-based, as well as, those who came before you kind of wanting to help you move forward in the firm. So there was some management skills at the time. We had to show some kind of management skills. So we were given different roles of managing people and teams and seeing how that went. But since that time, partner at all the other firms I've been at has been client-based, right? Do you bring clients to the firm? Do you have a book of business? Can you build that book of business? Is that firm a good platform to build that and to cross-sell with other folks in the firm? So, and I think that's just part of being at a big firm in particular. I was at two big firms before, well, three big firms before coming back to the Appellate boutique arena, which is where I am now at Complex Appellate Litigation Group, which itself is like a unique animal of appellate boutiques in that we're all very experienced. We all have like 15 years or more experience either in the courts or litigating outside the courts as appellate lawyers. And there's, over 20 of us now doing that together. And so I still get that like brainstorming teamwork stuff with some very experienced people participating in that.
So when you're at Horvitz and Levy, you had those people guiding you, helping you out with your appellate briefs and, giving you the reins to sort of figure it out, but at the same time, allow you to ask questions, be able to help you in anything that you need and be able to brainstorm with you to make those appellate briefs as beautiful as they possibly can be. And that is a form of mentorship. So now I ask the question of how important mentorship has been for you and what ways do you suggest people find that mentorship that they need in order to advance in their career and live and have beautiful lives?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. I think especially students and law students and everyone, even just starting into something new, even if they're changing careers, are focused on that, right? Like mentoring is so important. I think I have a couple of different answers to that. The first thing is, mentoring and sponsoring are two different things. So you can have someone who helps you build up the skills and, really trains you in a skill-based way, but they may not be the people who sponsor you. That is people who are in the room, who say good things about you when you're not in the room, when decisions are being made about your career, and who promote you for different positions. So I think those are two different roles that people can play. The second thing is that I think sometimes people have a perception that once you find you just need to find the one mentor, who will pave the way for the rest of your life kind of thing. And some people do have that. They have the recurring sort of mentor that sticks with them their whole career, either in the same place or just continues to look out for them over time. And some people do have that kind of mentoring, and that's a great form of mentoring. But that's not the only form. So there are some circumstances where you have a particular, you're applying to a particular job or you're in a particular firm, and there's someone who sort of comes in at the right moment to help you and provide the skills that you need or the advice that helps you look at something differently and, maybe press forward when something is challenging. And that's a form of mentoring too. And some of those that means you could have many of them throughout your career, mentors and sponsors who are like that, who come in at the right time. And I think I'm probably the latter of those. I do have the benefit of some people who were, longer term mentors, like the judges I clerked for, even Ellis Horvitz. But also, I think more frequently is that scenario where people see something in you that you may not see in yourself, and they say, yeah, MC should do that. And you may not even know. I think this is another important thing too. I think sometimes people think that they'll see the mentor in action. They'll know, the mentor or sponsor in action. Most of the time, especially the sponsors, you may never know. You may never know that somebody said something in your favor or, did something to help you get in a position. But when you get older and more advanced in your career, you recognize that you could not have gotten that position because you're now in those rooms. And you realize this is how it works. Somebody speaks up for you, somebody recommends you, and you may never know who that was, but you certainly know that it had to have happened because that's how the world works. So I think that's another important one. You may never know. There may be mentors and sponsors you may never know that, at least on the sponsor side in particular, you may never know that you had. But the only way to handle that is to pay it forward and to be that for other people.
Of course, that is the most powerful point you can make. As always, we love talking about that, the fact that anyone is more than willing to help, because just like yourself, you had those mentors in your life that helped you get to where you are in your career. You as well will give back. So as always, for people out there listening, always send that text message, always send that email, always make
Yeah,
that
you're
phone
right.
call, because they will more likely than not answer. And if that person in particular doesn't answer, there's about 10,000 more people that you can message that will help you out on your career and anything that you simply meet. So always make that message, make that email, make that phone call. But I think one of the things that I saw that you said that was very interesting was sort of that dichotomy between mentorships and sponsoring. I've actually never heard anyone say that on this podcast in terms of really distincting those two. That's not a word, but really, identifying that there are those two sorts of ways that you can do it. And it just goes to show how important being that hard worker is, being efficient, being reliable, because there may be people watching you that you don't even know that are going on your behalf, being like, they're a great employee, they're a great lawyer, we should do everything in our power to keep them around. So that is also so powerful as well. But going forward in your career, you then in 2010 became an appellate partner at Snell and Wilmer. You were there for 5 years. So can you talk about that experience that you had there?
Yeah, so there was a point when I wanted to come back to Orange County from Los Angeles, and because I only left the county because I wanted to go get the experience and to do the appellate work. And then I think as you reach, a certain age, you're like, well, I'd like to be back with my family. I'd like to be back where I grew up. One of the leader of the appellate group here at Snell and Wilmer in Orange County, he had tried to hire me like a couple of times previously. The first time I had just accepted at Horvitz and Levy, and the second time I just made partner at Horvitz and Levy, and so he just had terrible timing. So finally I was like, okay, Rick, this is it. The third time is the charm. So I ended up coming back to Orange County and working with him at Snell and Wilmer, which is moving from a boutique to a larger firm, which is a different environment. I don't know if I'm sure people have talked about that before, but I mean, boutiques usually are focused on one or two kind of practice areas of law, and they're smaller, maybe, 30, 40 lawyers or less. And then you're moving to a law firm with, hundreds of lawyers with multiple offices, across the Western United States, at least at Snell and Wilmer. So yeah, so it's a different environment, but I was glad to be back in Orange County and to have that challenge really of moving from the boutique that I was kind of raised at to a firm with an appellate department, and figuring out how to manage that and work with that within the firm, and how to grow that practice in that firm. So I think Snell and Wilmer is where I really learned my client relationship and like business development chops. I really earned them at Snell and Wilmer. So yeah, and then I got recruited away to Haynes and Boone, which I would say the story of that one is a really good one, for you just never know what will happen. So while I was at Snell and Wilmer, I was asked to like at the last minute, like put together this panel for a business trial lawyers association in Orange County. And at the time I felt sort of like, sometimes you feel like this is sort of a thankless job. Like I'm doing all the legwork, I'm doing all of this stuff. I was really busy. I really didn't have a lot of bandwidth to do it. And it was just one of those things, you're like, why did I agree to do this thing? It's just too much. I shouldn't have. And it turned out that the president of that bar association was the managing partner at Haynes and Boone in Orange County. And he really liked the presentation, and he thought I did a good job and all of this stuff. So then a couple years later, when the firm, Haynes and Boone, was talking about expanding and opening an appellate practice in California when they had a really strong one in Texas, the partner remembered me from that and said, well, we have to call MC. MC should be the one that opens that practice. So I put that in the category of you never know what could happen, like you're saying, Nate, like do your best on everything and you just never know where it could go.
Of course, as I always say, there's always all those open doors, but sometimes you just got to go through them, and you never know what's on the other side. Even if you don't get a lot of bandwidth to do it, you put your best foot forward, and then you end up having a new job. And of course, you were at Haynes and Boone. You were there for 5 years, but I want to go back a little bit because as you were there at Snell and Wilmer, you were keeping very busy. I love doing my research. I found out you were the board chair at Red Hen Press. You still were hanging on for your poetry live, and you were helping out there, getting these people their literature and poetry out into the world. You're there for 2 years. I thought that was very interesting. But you were doing even more work. You were an adjunct professor at Whittier Law School. You're there for 4 years, and you're also a lecturer at the University of Cal Irvine School of Law. You were the appellate advocacy client, and I could just keep going all day because you were also in 2016. You still are an adjunct professor at Loyola Law School in Los Angeles. You're trained students representing appellate cases. It's all about appellate cases, and I think that may be it for all the professorships that you have held so far, and you still currently held. So I love asking this question to people who are professors: would I want you as a teacher?
I don't know. I don't know. We'll see the answer to that question. I guess we can ask some of my students. I think they had good experiences. I'm tough though, but in my, except for Whittier where I taught, an advocacy class. I've taught for over 10 years, as you said, at Loyola Law School and at UC Irvine. And they've been in clinics. So appellate clinics where we have real cases and the students argue them before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, the Federal Court of Appeals here in the Western United States. And they work on the briefs, they do all of that. It's really an amazing experience to have before you even graduate law school. Most lawyers don't even have that experience for many years of practice. So it's great training. But, that's in the context of, you have a client, like whether you please me or not is not the question. The question is like, we want to do the best job we can for the client, right? So we're all focused on that as the goal. And in the process, even if they don't end up becoming appellate lawyers, they really learn a lot about good writing, about persuasion, about oral argument, all of that. That's so helpful. Those skills are so translatable across all kinds of law practice and even outside law practice, being able to speak on your feet and all of that. So it's really great. I feel like it's part of giving forward to the next generation of making sure they have very good skills, as they move into whatever they want to do. So so I've really enjoyed that. I'm still teaching at Loyola this semester, actually, and I'm teaching next semester a new clinic focused on California Appellate Clinic, and which I'm collaborating on with a full-time law professor at Loyola, Rebecca Delfino. And I'm also going to be teaching for the first time a class in space law.
Exciting, very exciting. You know what? We'll just go to the space law stuff because it's been on my mind ever since I saw it, probably so many months ago. I saw space law. I was like, oh, I got to talk to this lady. I need to find out what this is all about. So you are indeed an LLM candidate at the Center of Air and Space Law at the University of Mississippi. So what in God's name is space law? I need to know so bad. And what exactly are you doing to as a candidate? What are you working towards in getting this certification in space law? And then can you please explain what space law is?
Sure. So, I think that the short answer is traditionally space law is international law. So there's treaties between the different states. And because traditionally space exploration was really driven by nation states. And now we have a combination of more nation states beyond the small coterie of spacefaring nations that originally existed. So, US, Russia, and now we're expanding to quite a few more. And also all of the commercial space companies, so like SpaceX and Blue Origin and all of that, who are largely working with the government or have the government as their client in many cases, but are also, in the mix now. So there's just a wide variety, even small satellites, countries can launch small satellites. It's not as expensive anymore. So it's really expanding, but the core of space law, the foundation of space law is international law. And then there's the domestic law of each state around how they regulate and what kind of requirements they have for either launching or other aspects of space. So yeah, so it's all the law surrounding that, whether we're talking about national legislation, more informal standards and guidelines, and national and international bodies, and then of course the treaties.
So you are as well a leader at For All Moonkind, which I love that name very much. Now, where did this interest in space law come from? I need to know.
That's a really good question. I think like anything, I think the interesting part of this is to remind everyone how we can continue to evolve, right? Like just following your curiosity and your interests, and like don't kind of give up on doing that, even as I am many decades into your career. One of the things I love about appellate law is that it's different each time. Every case we learn really like a new sort of very targeted area of the law for that case. And our job is to explain to the appellate courts why, like our case, which is a little rock or pebble in the stream of the law, should fit a certain way or cause the stream to continue to go the way it's going, or maybe go off in a different direction. And I think that constantly learning new things within that is what's kept me in space in appellate law to begin with. And so to the same token is why I'm interested in space law. I'm constantly interested in learning new things. So I will say that my father was an aerospace engineer, and he did work on some of the early projects and the Apollo missions at defense contractors. So I have that background, right? Growing up with him doing that. And so I always have that kind of soft spot in my heart for that. And plus, I just think like space is badass. I mean, just what people have done to, especially like the Apollo astronauts. I mean, compared to the technology we have now, like it is just amazing that people would like throw themselves into space and landing on the moon in something that today there's no way we would allow anyone to do that in. So there's a sense of adventure. There's a sense of like the potential for humanity that's in that I think is very inspiring to a lot of people. So there's that sort of that aspirational aspect. And then I think there are two other things that ended up sort of getting me to apply and gratefully being accepted into the LLM program. So the first thing is my podcast, which is that I interviewed Michelle Hanlon, who is the executive director of the Center for Air and Space Law at Ole Miss, because I too was intrigued. I'm like, space law, what is that? I want to learn about that. So, and I just really thought she had a really inspiring story. And afterwards she said, you might consider, studying this. I think you would be good at it, and that you would have a different perspective that is needed given where we're at in space law, which is a lot of new technologies, a lot of new actors, and the law the basic framework is there, but maybe working out, how that should apply really hasn't been done. And so that seemed to me like a skill I have from being an appellate lawyer that I could translate and apply and help with a new venture. So that got me initially interested. I started thinking about it. And then I was like, wow, an LLM, that's a huge commitment, and it's a lot of time, and it's very difficult to do alongside a full-time practice. So let me make sure that I really want to do that. So I think this is like kind of a roadmap for everyone. If you're thinking about, exploring something new, right? Okay, think about it. Think, is there something you can add and something you can contribute to that area that's uniquely yours? And then the second thing is like, find out if you like it, right? I remember this early in my career. I thought I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I was thinking about like being an environmental lawyer. And so I tried it out. I worked with a partner in my firm, and I was like, wow, I really don't like this actually. It's like very administrative law, very regulation driven, and it was too focused, in one area. I like having a lot of substantive areas. So I took that to say, okay, make sure you like this space law thing, right? Because it could sound good, but it's not really interesting. So I took as many classes as I could see sort of offered online and either in space business or space law. And one of the space business classes I took, I remember they had a very small space law component to it. And the person who's like an international expert in space law, I just like raised my hand being a litigator. And I said, so if something happens and, you have a conflict with someone in space, like if you're a company, where do you go? Like where do you sue them? How do you get this done if you have a dispute with someone? And the answer was like, well, they can't possibly sue on their own. They have to get their country, their nation, their launching state, whatever, to decide to file a claim for them, in international court. And he seemed to think this was an acceptable answer. And I'm like, I don't think so. Like not for people who are, moving fast and maybe startups or whatever, they can't afford to do that. And moreover, the country could decide not to pursue something for political reasons. So that also didn't seem very satisfactory. So I thought, there seems to be a huge gap here about what we should do. Maybe somebody should think about that. So that started me thinking like, well, maybe I could use the LLM to think about some of these larger problems, write a thesis on them and, make an impact. And so that kind of led me towards applying. The final thing was that I took a class with just completely unexpectedly with Brian Irell, who at the time was in charge of certain aspects of space policy at the US State Department, but he was also, teaching on the side. And he said to me, you think about these things differently. I think you would have something to add. You should consider, going to school. And I was like, okay, fine. Like there's enough people who've said this. So I'm going to apply and see what happens. And so I did, and I got in, and it's a great program. It's the LLM is remote largely. So my fellow students in the LLM program are all over the world. So, they work in-house at the space companies, or they work for JAG or for Space Force or things like that, where they're doing that kind of work already. Or they're like me, working in other areas, but having an interest in contributing to the whole space law equation.
Well, first, I just have to say that is ridiculously fascinating. My suggestion, we should put a court in space, have it be space court. I think that's a great idea. You have to fly a rocket ship to get there if you want to make a claim or something like that. So maybe it dissuades people from trying to sue other people in space. I don't know. But hopefully they get me on Mars. I'll be the first one to get on the rocket ship. And of course, it is amazing that you can actually claim my dad was a rocket scientist, and it's as true can be. I cannot do the same thing. Not many people can. So that is just amazing as well, that he was working on some of the most groundbreaking technology in the history of the world. I mean, up until that point, no one left for space, no one landed on the moon, and they got that stuff done. So I hope in my lifetime, I pray that we make it to Mars. I could see someone on Mars, something cool like that. They start building civilization. I don't know. The possibilities are endless, and I think that's why it's so interesting. But let's talk about your podcast, because that's exactly how you found the space law. So you are the creator and host of the award-winning Portia Project. You look for leading women to show the progress that women have made in the law. So can you talk about why you started the podcast in the first place and how it's going so far?
Yeah, thanks, Nate. I started it initially, I want to say it's been maybe two and a half years ago now. I originally was working on a book that was focused on women appellate judges and their journeys, because I had noticed that there weren't as many women in that role as I would have expected to see at this point. And so I thought, well, it's a relatively small universe of people that I would need to talk to, and I wanted to encourage people to apply, encourage people to consider becoming judges. I think that sometimes people have in their mind, whether it's about a judge or other career, that there's only one route or there's a certain route, and if you don't have a certain experience, like it's not going to happen for you. And my experience was that's not true. The judges I knew had very different backgrounds. And so just hearing their stories, I thought that would inspire people to like not knock themselves out of the running too soon. So, and also celebrate those women who had achieved that. So I was working on the book, and I discovered that the format wasn't it wasn't working for me. Like I enjoyed talking to them, but then boiling it down into an essay format really kind of sucked out like the personality of the people when we were talking. And I thought it was more inspiring to hear their stories directly. So I kind of set that project aside, and then COVID came and our lockdowns and pandemic and all of that stuff. And people listen to podcasts a lot more. Lawyers were listening to podcasts a lot more. So I thought about it and I thought, well, I wonder if a podcast is the right medium for this project. And so I was like, well, the only way to find out is to find out if people will want to be interviewed for it. Like there's no podcast unless people want to talk. So I was like, okay, I'm going to, try this out and ask, like 12 people I knew, 16 people I knew, if they were willing to do it. I was going to have like the whole sort of first season in place. And then as that went, then I'd go to a next season. And what happened was that it sort of had a life of its own. First of all, everybody was available because people were still at home, or, court wasn't as busy. So the judges were more available at the time. And they weren't traveling. No one was traveling. So it made it easier to be able to record these quickly. And before the podcast even launched, all of the guests who had been on it had recommended like one or two other people who they thought would be really good. And so by the time it launched, I ended up having like over 30 interviews. And then it just kept, snowballing. So it branched out far more beyond appellate judges, although I've now interviewed judges on 32 different state Supreme Courts around the country, and federal judges and, trial judges, and just all kinds of folks in that arena, but also branching out to women leading in other ways. So I started thinking, if I were in law school again, I would want to know all of the different kinds of things you can do with a law degree, and hear the stories, right? So very similar to your podcast and your interest in kind of exploring for yourself, but also allowing other people to explore what kind of lawyer they might have an interest in being. And that's kind of what I was thinking too, with the dual purpose of showing that women are leading in a lot of these areas across the law already. And so if someone's like concerned, oh, I'll be the first, in many cases, that's not true anymore. So women managing partners of large firms or boutique firms, just a variety of that. And also women who are not practicing law anymore, but are using their law degrees. So leading nonprofits or being authors or novelists, just doing different things with that training. So that's kind of the whole array. And there's I think we'll be coming up on 200 episodes this fall.
Well, first of all, I have to say, huge congratulations on the podcast. And once again, I can now receive accusations for stealing people's ideas, which of course I did. I'll give you credit right now. I stole your idea. But of course, it's an amazing concept. And as we love to talk about on this podcast, and as you love to talk about in your podcast, well, I guess this is more my message. You could steal it as well, don't worry. But that there is no straight path to law or law school. There's only your unique journey. And it's so, so important to show off those unique journeys. For those people who may have went to law school, maybe don't have an interest in working at a law firm or something like that, there are so many paths, actually a ridiculous amount of different paths that you can take in the law, especially if you have a law degree. Even if you don't have a law degree, you can still get yourself involved into the legal industry and legal field in some way, shape, or form. And I think it's a wonderful thing that you're showing those stories at. And of course, it's super duper successful. So I hope to be successful like that one day myself with my podcast. But now I wanted to talk about your current job as a partner at Complex Appellate Litigation Group. But before that, I need to talk about something which caught my eye when I was doing my research here. But you are an Ellis Island Medal of Honor Award recipient. That is absolutely amazing. It was a huge honor. I didn't know what it was before. I started looking into it. I was like, oh my God, this is very important. So can you tell us a little bit how you won that award? And where did someone special give it to you? Like, was it the president who were like putting on it? I know I always see the picture of Barack Obama putting the medal on that guy. So I hope it's the same thing.
Oh, it's not the same thing. That's a presidential award. It's not that, but yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's recognized in the congressional record. So every year there's a notation of who has received the award in the congressional record, but it's not a governmental award. So the Ellis Island Honor Society is the one who awards them. And it's focused on either first generation or children of immigrants who have provided, like basically contributed to society. So it isn't just a professional award, it's philanthropy, it's, service, it's a number of those things put together and sort of, all wrapped in the US flag, as it were, in the way of contributing to the United States. So it was amazing. It was amazing. I was nominated for it, and then, when I got it, it was amazing. So the ceremony where you get your award is on Ellis Island. So you go out at night, this whole special thing, and they have all kinds of like branches of the military who are lined up and like greeting you, and you land in the arrivals hall on Ellis Island, which is where two of my grandparents came, many years ago. So there's it's like an amazing full circle moment that you have when you go to that. And then the full medal ceremony is really neat, and a lot of different people, some of the recipients speak. So actually Buzz Aldrin was one of the recipients the year that I got my award, as well as Thomas Keller, the chef in Napa, and other places. New York, he has great restaurants in New York as well. So yeah, so there's just a whole array of people. I think that's what I love about it too, is that it's like contributing to society in a number of different ways. It's definitely not a law thing. I don't think there are many lawyers who have it, but a lot of presidents do. So there are multiple US presidents who've been recipients of it also. So anyway, yeah, it was an amazing award and an amazing evening. And yeah, I'll never forget that. It was amazing. And then when we left at night, they had fireworks over the Statue of Liberty for us as we left the island. So yeah, it was really neat. And definitely things like that like encourage you to continue to, do your thing, be you, and contribute to the world.
Well, I just have to say, that is absolutely incredible. And it's even more funny that Buzz Aldrin was there, because many years later, you'd end up putting yourself into space law. It's super fun. How more full circle can it get than that? I think it's absolutely amazing. The fireworks show over the Statue of Liberty. As a New Yorker myself, that's a lovely sight. I love seeing something like that. I always love the Statue of Liberty as well. One of my favorite places.
It's very patriotic and very inspiring. It's really cool.
Exactly. Everyone's chanting USA. But let's go to what you do now. You are a partner at Complex Appellate Litigation Group. Started there in 2023. So how has that experience been, and what is your vision for the future there?
Yeah, it's been really great. Like I said earlier, it's been a great opportunity to work with people who are all experienced at different levels in different ways. So if I have a case in the California Supreme Court, we have the former clerk of the court, who's with our firm. I have other former research attorneys at the Ninth Circuit and clerks from the Ninth Circuit, so the Federal Court of Appeals. We have a retired justice from the State Court of Appeal who's also with the firm, and she's really helpful in providing, judicial perspective on things. So it's just really great to have that whole group of people who are experienced in different ways, contributing to thinking about a case and working on a case together.
Law students, are you feeling overwhelmed, stressed, or short on time in law school? Maybe you just want someone to show you a step-by-step framework to master the topics you're learning in your classes. I know the pressure you're under, and I've got the perfect solution for you. My course, The Law School Operating System, is proven to help you conquer law school with confidence and ease.
Created by Lisa Blasser, a former guest on the podcast and founder of the Law School Success Institute, this course breaks down every subject into manageable main topics that you run through a comprehensive study system to thoroughly prepare you for class and final exams. No more feeling like you need to know everything all at once in the beginning.
But that's not all, Nate. The Law School Operating System also teaches you how to schedule your studying and time effectively. For every topic, you'll know which study step you're on and when you'll complete it every week of your semester. No more mad dash cram sessions, more time with your loved ones. And with my system, you'll walk into your exams knowing you've given 100% of yourself, that there's nothing more you could have done to succeed, and there's no better confidence than that.
Lisa breaks it down like this: one class, one list of main topics, and one system to master each topic. With recorded and live sessions for students available on her website and partnerships with law schools nationwide, the Law School Operating System is here to help you thrive from day one to the final exam. Ready to take control of your law school journey and operate at your full potential in law school? Visit www.lisablassers.com today and enroll in the Law School Operating System. Be sure to use code LSOSNATE10 at checkout for 10% off the recorded course. That is code LSOSNATE10 at checkout. Now, back to the show. Well, it seems like the complex appellate litigation group is the dream team itself. I mean, you got all the cheat codes you could possibly think of. You got the former clerks, you got the justices. I mean, that's just absolutely amazing. A powerhouse litigation group. I love to hear that. But MC, we're now down to our last 5 questions. The first of the 5 questions, and something that I've been seeing throughout my entire journey doing this podcast, that the law is moving in a certain direction. More people are adopting these new technologies, whether it be software, AI technologies, whatever they may be. So this is the tech stack question per se, but what does your tech stack look like, and what suggestions would you have for people for any technologies that you use either at work or just at home for your personal life, anything like that?
Yeah, so I'm going to give a couple of recommendations. The first one is Brief Catch. So that's a legal tech company founded by Ross Guberman, who is a writing instructor and I would say extraordinaire, who trains judges how to write, and wrote 2 books that are just mainstays in legal writing: Point Made and Point Taken. Point Taken is for judges, how to write opinions. And so he created Brief Catch, which is an AI program that can be inserted into the Word document. And so it basically provides editing suggestions for the brief, grammatical, even citation related, but also has all of these different criteria about what makes a brief snappy, all of these different criteria, and it grades your brief on those. And it tells you where could it use some help? Are you too wordy? Do you have really long sentences and paragraphs? Could you maybe cut those down? It's a really great training thing. I've used it from the very beginning with my students. It's very helpful to them as they get further on in the drafting of their briefs. And then, as I said, I use it at the very end of my briefs as well for a really long time. So when it was in beta stages, I was using this, and now it's one of the most well-known legal tech tools. And now I'm serving on a special advisor role for a Brief Catch and all of that kind of stuff. So full disclosure, I'm in that role, but years prior to that, I loved Brief Catch, before I was in that role. So that's a really good one. Also, I have to shout out to Trellis also, which is a great resource for state judicial opinions, at the trial court level, which really hasn't been done until Trellis did it. ClearBrief is another really good appellate tool that people use when brief writing also, that kind of integrates the record and whatever documents you have into the brief. And let me see, what else can I say? I think those are probably the main, I would say the most often used legal ones. The other thing I would say would be something that's more of a design program. So any of the AI design things, not for the content, because AI still has issues with content, especially in the legal realm. They don't get it right very often. But anything that helps you design things. So your slides or your presentations or things like that, whether it's I personally use Beautiful AI for PowerPoint slides, really helps make it nice without having to have a design person, separately do that for you.
Well, those are all great recommendations. I've heard of them all. They've all been, except Trellis, never heard of that one. So that is a new recommendation. We always love a new recommendation here. But fourth to last question here, MC. Speaking of books, Ross Guberman's books, Point Made and Point Taken, what are your book recommendations for people out there? Doesn't have to be about the law, just some of your favorite books you've ever read, something to give a gift to someone.
Okay. All right. So any book. Well, I do in the legal realm recommend Ross's books. So I'll include that in this. And writing. So I read so much, like such a wide variety of everything from like, more like personal development to trends to like just new ideas. I like that sort of genre. I of course like poetry. And fiction as well. So fiction, nonfiction, just everything. I still read a lot, even though I took a brief hiatus in law school because that was too much reading overall. So let's see. I would say, as far as like poetry, I like Wallace Stevens or even Mary Oliver, who's more simple looking on the surface, but actually is pretty deep. And novels. Let's see. I always really loved A.S. Bayat. She had this novel called Possession, which was super popular and well regarded like many years ago. So really kind of complex story. I like that. Yeah, I think that's what I'll go with right now. It could change day to day.
Listen, more than sufficient answer. I love the complex stories. It goes because you're doing complex litigation, so you love that. So then you love your complex stories. I like that little intertwining there. But third to last question here, MC. What are the sorts of things that you consume, not food, consume on a daily basis? Either that be through social media, so LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, Reddit, Facebook, any podcasts you listen to that you recommend, any people on Substack or any people on LinkedIn that you would recommend? What is crossing the transom of MC's mind on a daily basis?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, I would say like my LinkedIn feed is like an interesting combination of like the international realm, because when pandemic happened, lawyers like all over the world really got on LinkedIn. And so as a result of that, I have a lot of, sort of LinkedIn friends from the UK and from other parts of the world, which I really wouldn't have otherwise. So I like to look at like the silver lining of COVID is that we have, much greater reach than previously. So I'm active on LinkedIn. I do also listen to podcasts. I really like Michael Gervais, Finding Mastery. I also like High Performance, which is a UK program. And I like Rich Roll too. I think he's pretty cool.
Rich Roll, one of my favorites ever. I'm always listening to his podcast. My favorite podcast is with Peter Attia himself, which is...
Oh, Peter Attia is also good. I was going to say, yeah, in the health category, Peter Attia is really great.
Peter Attia, one of my favorites ever. I've learned it's ridiculous amount of information, and I'm always using it. He's always just putting out those good insights because, of course, he's one of the smartest people on this planet. So he could take all that complex stuff, all the science stuff, and then distill it for me to use because I'm not smart enough to understand anything that he's saying, but I get the little things, and it's amazing. And of course, Rich Roll and Peter Attia, always my favorite recommendation for people. It is a really sad episode, but it's just so powerful. The emotions are run high in that one, but it's very, very good. Peter Attia tells a wonderful story about him, his struggles, whatever it may be. But second to last question here, MC, you're working, you got space, you got all this going on, but what does an ideal Friday night and Sunday morning look for MC?
Oh my gosh, usually there's work involved in there or work. So at least right now I'm like, oh yeah, that's definitely part of it. But yeah, like ideal, that's different. Yeah, I mean, I like nature. So going out in nature, whether it's at our beaches, as we talked about in Southern California, or otherwise, it's really nice to get a little break from all of the other activities that are going on and just enjoy and appreciate nature. I really like that, especially the ocean, the waves, pretty neat. So it's a special thing. We get to just be a few minutes away from that here in Southern California. So I would definitely enjoy that. And yeah, I think that's part of it. Brunch with friends, walking the dogs, having a long hike with one of my dogs, and probably some church in there somewhere on Sunday, but yeah.
Well, and speaking of the beach, I hope you can feel my jealousy through the screen right now. I hope you can, because my God, do I wish more than anything to be there in Southern California. Maybe not this week because it's so hot, but any other time in the year. Oh my gosh, just think about it now. So I'll be there one day. I'm going to be there one day. Don't you worry, I'm saying. But we're now down to our last question. I do this at the end of every single episode. But
Okay.
what are your words of wisdom for the aspiring law students, the current law students, and legal professionals out there in the world?
Okay. So I think I have a couple of different things. So the one thing is sort of, I think, like they exemplified by my story, right? Which is to continue to be open and to continue to evolve. And I think sometimes in law school in particular, people say, well, gee, once you basically can only go one route, or like, well, once you're a business litigator, you're a business litigator, and I think like don't limit yourself, or don't think that just because you've chosen one thing after law school that you can't choose something else. And to be able to like share your skills is also to be able to share your evolving and growing interests and things that bring you joy and things that you can contribute to the world. So don't think like, I've chosen this, I can never change it. Not true. And even if you're happy with what you're doing, maybe there's something else that's also interesting, to be willing to explore that and kind of see where that goes as well. I think that's one of our joys of living, right? Not being static, and sharing different parts of yourself. So I think that would be one thing. I think the other thing, which I don't think I'm necessarily good at, but I wish I were. So I'll give the advice to myself in part, which is sometimes you can be like really focused on one thing. Like, hey, I'm going for this, or I want to do this one thing. And sometimes, you're like not looking, you've got blinders on. And so you're not looking at things. You're walking down the store and you're like, I only want to find this one boutique. But along the way, there's some really nice looking boutiques that if you looked at them, you might go in them. And that's sort of this category of like, don't be, focus is important, but like too focused, you may not be open to other opportunities that you might like just as well or more. So there's that kind of advice. I think I had a guest on my podcast who is a nonprofit leader and really has this tremendous story of coming back, basically coming back to life. So she had a really difficult medical scenario, and she came back. And she said, well, I've decided like what my general purpose is, my purpose of who I want to help. But the way I do that can change, could be different in each time, and it will change because of my skills are changing and things are evolving as well. So I think of that as being like a very interesting perspective on it. Don't be so focused on like one thing. Maybe the thing is broader and you can accomplish that in a number of different ways.
Well, MC, it's beautifully said. Of course, don't pigeonhole yourself. There's so many different opportunities, and always to remain present. Obviously we want to focus on our goals, but I always focus on picking pennies up off the ground, because when I see them, I know I'm present, I'm ready, and I'm seeing those pennies all over the place. As my mother says, pick a penny, pick it up all day long. You'll have good luck. But MC, that is the episode. That is the podcast. So thank you so much for coming on here, spreading your wisdom, spreading your experiences. And for everyone out there listening, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to check us out, lawyersinthemaking.substack.com, lawyersinthemaking, one word, substack.com, and I will see you all in the next one.